Okay. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मनोजवं मारुततुल्यवेगं जितेन्द्रियं बुद्धिमतां वरिष्ठं वातात्मजं वानरयूथमुख्यं श्रीरामदूतं शिरसा नमामि। कूजन्तं राम रामेति मधुरं मधुराक्षरम् आरुह्य कविता शाखां वन्दे वाल्मीकिकोकिलम्। आपदामपहर्तारं दातारं सर्वसम्पदां लोकाभिरामं श्रीरामं भूयो भूयो नमाम्यहम्। दक्षिणे लक्ष्मणो यस्य वामे च जनकात्मजाः पुरतो मारुतिर्यस्य तं वन्दे रघुनन्दनम्। So nice to be with all of you in our continuation of Valmiki Ramayana, Yuddha Kanda. Although Yuddha hasn't begun, but the episodes that are building up towards the fight is exciting. On this side, Sri Ramachandra, Lakshmana, under the leadership of Sugriva, Hanuman, Jambavan, and the mighty Vanaras are planning how to cross this ocean. And on this side of the ocean, Ravana is sitting in his palace, being inspired, instigated, provoked by his ministers to wage a full-on war because they think they are stronger than humans and monkeys. However, in this assembly where they're talking of war and they're all speaking about their might, each one is standing up, holding their weapons and telling Ravana, no need for anyone to go. I will finish the entire Vanara army, etc. There is one voice of reason, just one, and that is Vibhishana. So chapter 9, those who like to follow along with the book, we are in chapter 9. So Vibhishana begins with his hands folded, Pranjali, while they're all getting too excited to fight. He, with folded hands, goes to Ravana and his ministers and say, please, please sit down and hear me. I have something important to tell you. Because these Ravana's ministers, as they are instigating Ravana's valor, it means that for Lanka, the bell of death is about to ring. Because they are thinking they can fight Rama and Lakshmana. They are thinking of they're all human beings and monkeys. Each one of us is decorated general. Our scars, our weapons, our mystic abilities, our strength, our race, our clan is far superior to human beings. And human beings are superior to monkeys. So if he can defeat those two human beings, Rama and Lakshmana, then killing the monkeys is not difficult. So Vibhishana addresses Ravana as Tata. Tata is a word of endearment. It's like my dear. Tata is also a word used for father. Um, but here it means my dear, or my very dear brother. He says Tata. So the usage of the word Tata, because it's a word of affection, tells Ravana that Vibhishana is not saying this angrily. Vibhishana is saying this lovingly. So that the stance is very clear that Vibhishana is speaking not out of fear, although his name is Vibhishana, he is the one who causes fear in others. He is speaking lovingly, almost pleading. He's pleading with Ravana and Ravana's ministers. You can follow along the verses. I'm going to give you my appreciation of the different reasonings that Vibhishana provides. Today's title is Vibhishana's attempt to reason with Ravana. So there are multiple reasons. I think I have 6 reasonings. The first one, Vibhishana begins with options. Ravana, you're all getting excited, and all of you are getting excited for battle. But have you exhausted other options? In diplomacy, in ruling, in leadership, there are other options. The famous they're called Sama, Dana, Bheda, and Danda. Danda is fighting or punishment. But there are other 3. Sama. Have you considered these, O Ravana? So Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, calls them upayas. Upayas means or methods. Whenever there is a conflict and the conflict has to be resolved, then he says that there are these 4 methods. So Samadama or Dana, Samadana, Bheda, and Danda. Sama, the first step, we know Sama means to pacify, to cause reconciliations or to form alliances. So when 2 parties are in conflict and that conflict has to be resolved, the very first step is to talk to each other. A lot of people, a lot of parties fight with each other, never speak to each other, never speak to understand what their needs and interests are and to convey what this party's needs and interests and concerns are. So according to Chanakya, there are 5 ways of 5 ways of arriving at conciliation or forming alliances. He says first is to praise the other party, to find strengths and good things in the other person and speak about them. Or speak about on the basis of a relationship. For example, one may say, you know what, rather than you and I fight, a king will tell the other king, audio is not. A king will tell the other king, I will give my daughter in marriage to you or to your son, to your prince. That way, because of a forming of an alliance or a friendship or a relationship, the 2 parties may not war with each other so much. Or another way he says is to point out common benefits. If we are fighting, if we are going to remain in this conflict, both of us will lose something. Versus, let's see what we can gain mutually outside of this conflict. Or finally, he says to put oneself at the other person's disposal, meaning to say, you know what, that's okay. I will give up what is important for me if it means that there can be some peace. Although the person may not get what they're looking for, they may be unhappy, but the greater good is peace. Could you kindly mute yourselves, please? Thank you. Because I can hear uh, background noises. Thank you. The second is dana. Dana means to give gifts or to give compensation. It means they give some price and settle it. Two parties may be going to court. That's a war. But they will find some out of court settlement. They'll pay some money and say this topic is settled, because money may be a way of removing the conflict by one party pays the other party. Bheda means to cause some dissension in the other party. But it's using logic, sometimes trickery, influencing the mind of the opposite party, causing dissension within that party. So when let's say they're engaging with one, they may say, "Oh, you're speaking like this, but your team member said that, and I see a contradiction in that. So which of this is important?" And suddenly between the opposite party, there is a difference of opinion, and they're busy arguing between themselves, and it makes their stance weaker. Or sometimes in a conversation, the other person may say, well, I find what you're saying contradictory. You said this and you said that. So there's contradiction there. So the person may become weaker in their argument because of some bheda that there is there. And finally, danda. Danda is full-on war, fighting, confrontation, etc. And it should be, according to Chanakya, the very last resort. Even in the Kurukshetra situation, battle was the very last resort. In this case also, Ramachandra wants to cross the ocean. And even then, we will see Ramachandra is not interested in fighting. He's interested in recovering Sita back from Ravana's clutches. Ravana's army, first thing, wants to fight. They are and they are enthralled by, they are energized by the very idea of fighting. No discussion at all. So danda would be killing, plundering, fighting, punishing, etc. So Vibhishana is saying, have you considered sama, dana, bheda at all before all of you are getting also riled up about fighting? The second reasoning, he says, is the utility or efficacy of war. He says, any activity or a set of activities finds success, he uses the word siddhyanti, means become successful, when everything is carefully considered, pariksha, according to the rules, vidhina. Vidhina also means to fate or circumstances. Here, to rules, vidhina, and then you act upon them, kritaha, kritaha, because it's plural. If one just jumps into it without thinking through it, without a strategy, without intelligence guiding that action, is a high possibility that that action will not be successful. But if there is some thought behind it, there is some deliberation, those acts usually are successful. And then he gives a warning. If you want to just jump up and fight, sometimes it may work if the opponent is mad or wanted. Wanted means just a heavy sense gratifier, doesn't care for anything, called pramatta. because Rishabdev also says, Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. Those who are pramattas, maddened by sense gratification, always end up doing vikarma. So Vibhishna is saying, pramatteshu. For such persons, if you attack them, you might win. You don't have to think too much. Or abhiyukteshu, they're being attacked by someone else and you jump into the picture, then they become helpless. The other side becomes helpless. So that's called abhiyukteshu. Abhiyukteshu, someone else has come and engaged them. Or those who are already being beaten up by fate, by bad luck. Daivena prahateshu. Such persons are very vulnerable. So there you don't need to think much. You know how two people are fighting, a third one just jumps in, then the two people who are fighting, one of them becomes weaker because some external factor is joined into it. This is another way of telling Ravana, you may think that Ramachandra is any of these, but let me warn you, that is not Sri Ramachandra. In fact, quite the opposite. Apramattam katham tam tu vichigishum bale sthitam jitarosham duradharsham pradharshayutum ichhata. These are the characteristics of Ramachandra. He's always vigilant, which means he's always sober, always thoughtful, considering, and he thinks before he acts. Apramattam. And he's poised for victory, Vijigishum, and very strongly situated. Bale sthitam. What is his bala? His character, his ability to think through, his ability to weigh his words. And therefore, Ramachandra never is instigated by anger. Jitarosham, which also means he does not lose his reasoning capability easily. Those who become angry just like that, their emotions of anger or associated emotions take over so strongly that the reasoning capacity becomes dull. Right? Krishna says, Krodad bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhramra, smriti bhramshat buddhinasham. And Ramachandra is formidable, Duradharsham. You cannot fight him. And yet, how are you thinking to fight him? Katham tam, that person Ramachandra, tu pradharshiyutum ichhati. You are calculating to go and fight an enemy, or the Ramachandra here, he'll use the word enemy soon, when he has all the characteristics that tell you that fight is not a wise option. And he says, not only Ramachandra, it is unimaginable by any creature, by any person in this universe, the speed and strength of Hanuman by which with one jump he showed up to Lanka. It's an impossible act that he took care of very easily. So don't underestimate. Vibhishana is saying, don't underestimate the formidable strength and valor of the enemy. Now he uses the word enemy. For Vibhishana, Ramachandra is not the enemy, but it's the conversation of one side versus the other side. So he's telling, you may think of him as your enemy, but the enemy don't underestimate. Anytime you go to fight, you should never only rely on your strength. Well, people calculate, what is my strength? Oh, I have all these strengths. And they underestimate the strength of the opposition. A good strategist will estimate their own strength, but also the strength of the enemy. And he uses the word in this shloka, paresha. Para Isha means one who's fighting to be the master. So enemy. But Paresha also means the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavatam, we hear the verse, Bhakti Pareshanubhava Viraktir Anyatracha. These are the symptoms of bhakti. So he says, Para Isha Anubhava. When bhakti is going well, there are symptoms. And that's how you know that one is situated in bhakti. Para Isha Anubhava. One has the experience of the presence of the Lord in their life. The hand of the Lord, although invisible, becomes palpable. You feel the presence of Krishna's hand, Sri Ramachandra's hand in one's life. So by calling him Paresha, to externally to Ravana, it sounds like enemy. Internally, it means the Supreme Lord. So we've done it two reasonings. Third one. Third, intelligent reasoning Vibhishana is giving Ravana. You generally fight and attack someone who has made a mistake against you or committed an offense against you. Sri Ramachandra has not committed any offense. There is no fault in him. So why wage war? Ravana may say, what do you mean there's no fault? Sri Rama killed Khara, Dushana, Trishiras and 14,000 of my demon army members. So that's a reason. So Vibhishana is saying, no. Ramachandra was quietly moving about the forest, minding his own business in Janasthan. You abducted Sita Devi for no meaningful reason. If you were to say, oh, he killed Khara Dushna, then the dharma says, dharmic laws say, every living being has the right to defend themselves against any attack. Khara attacked Ramachandra, so he has every right. As you also have that right, everybody has the right for self-defense. So he killed Khara Dushna, everyone, in self-defense. And that's an universally accepted law that every living being is rightfully owner of. Reasoning number 4. Vibhishana says, since the moment you brought Sita here, we're all living in great fear of the consequences of that act. So if Ravana, you kidnapped her with some grudge against Sri Ramachandra for killing Khara, then the only outcome of this is Kalaha. Kalaha is strife or disturbance between two people. It's called Kalaha. A quarrel is called Kalaha. And nothing good comes from such quarrel and strife. There can never be a good outcome out of quarrel. When two people quarrel, nothing good comes out of it. In fact, Ravana, everything will be destroyed. You see this Lanka? Every square inch is studded with gems and royal stones, and there's a sense of royalty around it. You have great, mighty elephants, horses, chariots. All you think that Lanka is unreachable. The arrows of Sri Ramachandra will tear the entire Lanka apart. The raging monkeys will completely destroy Lanka and make it incapacitated. Nothing will happen in Lanka anymore. So, one of the reasonings is before you take an action, before you speak a word, think through what the consequences of that speech or that act will be for you and for others. If you don't consider consequences, you're putting yourself in a great position where mostly you will lose something or you will be fully regretful. They say, be very careful before you speak because you can never withdraw the words you've spoken. Fifth reasoning. He says, if you have enmity with someone, there should be an enmity with purpose. In this case, I don't see any purpose of this enmity. And this enmity without purpose bears no fruit. On that side, Ramachandra always follows dharma. Dharma anuvartina. Therefore, Sita Devi, he refers to her as Maithili, must be returned back to Ramachandra. Diyatam asya Maithili. Diyatam must be given back, must be presented back. Sixth reason, Ravana. I'm speaking out of well-wishing for you. You see the difference. Last week, we said that flattery erodes well-wishing. All the other ministers just wanted to flatter Ravana's pride and ego, and had an overestimation of their own strength. But nobody had the guts to tell Ravana, you did something wrong. This is not a good way. Only Vibhishana, who says, I am speaking these words because I care for our relationship. You are my brother, and it is for your benefit alone. Therefore, Ravana, Tyaja Ashu Kopam, immediately give up your anger. Sukha Dharma Nashanam. All your happiness and so-called dharmic nature, if it is there, because you perform all these pujas and all that, Nashanam will all get destroyed. Bhajashva Dharmam Ratikirti Vardhanam. This another way is the Teja Ashu Kopam Sukha Dharma means the sense of joy or thrill you're getting out of this anger will destroy everything. Instead, Bhajashva Dharmam Rati Kirti Vardhanam. Follow that dharma by which Rati and Kirti will increase for you. Prasida, oh my dear Ravana, be pleased with me. Jivema Putra Bandhava. Let's all happily live with our families and relatives. Pradiyatam Dasarathaya Maithili. Pradiyatam, you should return respectfully Dasharathaya, that Ramachandra, whose the name has a name, Dasharathi, Maithili. You should return. And he uses, previously he says, Diyatam Asya Maithili. Here he's calling Ramachandra as Dasarathi. Dasarathi because in the entire lineage of Ikshwaku kings, Dasharath Maharaj was known as the most dharmic person. In fact, his name, before it was Dharmaraj, before it was Dasharatha, which is the title, his name was Dharmaraja. So by calling Ramachandra Dasharathi, it means he is the son of that greatly dharmic person, which means he will not violate any rules of dharma. Also, he's coming in that lineage of Ikshwaku kings, of very, very fantastic, powerful kings, very benevolent. So if you return Sita Dasarathi, he will have no animosity with you. So the phrases, if you look to the chapter, Diyatam Asya Maithili, Sita Pradiyatam, Pradiyatam Dasarathaya Maithili. This appears 6 times as a refrain, again and again and again, showing that Vibhishana is literally begging Ravana. Ravana hears Vibhishana and dismisses everybody from his court, all his ministers, including Vibhishana, are dismissed. Ravana doesn't see it. One may think, oh, he's using his 10 heads to think over it. And he is. But remember, we started with Chanakya. So we'll also look at Chanakya again. Chanakya, in his Nitis or Sutras, says, Upadesho hi murkhanam prakopaya na shantaye. So if you murkha, means if you give a foolish person good advice, more upadesha means instruction or good advice. Murkhanam, if it is given, he certainly prakopaya, it incites more anger in them. Na shantaye, it doesn't pacify them. This is the symptom of being a fool, number one. That when we're given good advice, the fool becomes angrier or does even more foolish things. So in the purport to Canto 10, Chapter 4, Text 5, Prabhupada quotes this sutra by Chanakya, and Prabhupada writes, if a foolish person is given good instruction, he becomes more and more angry. Moreover, a cruel person is more dangerous than a snake. A snake and a cruel person are both cruel, but a cruel person is more dangerous because although a snake can be charmed by mantras or subdued by herbs, a cruel person cannot be subdued by any means. And Prabhupada says, such was the nature of Kamsa. Such is the nature of Ravana. That verse 10:4-5 is where Devaki is crying piteously to Kamsa, and she says, Diyatam, give me my daughter back, don't kill. But Kamsa doesn't care. Here Vibhishana is saying, Diyatam asya maithili, pradiyatam dasarathaya maithili. He's begging. He's begging for Ravana's good. But Ravana, who's a murkha, has 10 heads and no brain, is going to become very, very angry. Now, this is his brother. So he doesn't express his anger too loudly. How he expresses his dismissal or rejection of Vibhishana's plea is there in the next chapter. So I'll summarize that chapter. Next morning, early in the morning, the sun is just rising. Vibhishana rushes back into Ravana's chambers. Because this is the night time, he's hoping that Ravana had some time to think about it, as we say in English, hope you can sleep over it. That with his 10 heads, he's thought through, maybe I can convince him. And so Vibhishana goes. At this time, and as Vibhishana is traversing, Valmiki glorifies Lanka. And the glorification of Lanka is to give us the idea that very soon, all of this is going to get destroyed. Which if Ravana were to hear the advice, all of this can remain. In fact, it will grow. It will grow even better because it has Ramachandra's grace upon Ravana. So Valmiki describes the beautiful palaces of Lanka, especially Ravana's palace, which is so high, well-maintained, jeweled, decorated so wonderfully. And as Vibhishana is walking in, there is wafts of incense. There are women, groups of women who are murmuring and gossiping with each other, he says. But they're talking to each other. There is music. There are great Brahmanas reciting Vedic mantras, all for the benefit of Ravana. And as Vibhishana enters, Ravana is sitting on his throne by himself. And as Vibhishana is speaking, one by one, the ministers also assemble in that place. And this time Vibhishana tells him, look, everything that is around you. All of this is at risk. And from the very moment you brought Sita into Lanka, exactly from that moment onwards, something treacherous has been happening. That there has been evil omens all over the place. Uh, Here are the evil omens. He says, when we offer ghee into the yajna, the fire, although uttering proper mantras, the fire is not flaring up, which means Agni is not accepting the offerings. In fact, little sparks are flying everywhere, and the flames are enveloped in smoke and soot. Uh, Instead of a good fire, when done well, yajna should not have any smoke or soot. But in this case, there is black soot everywhere. The cows that give milk, very soon, quickly, the milk all becomes curdled, means it gets spoiled. Elephants, a good strong elephant is called being in a rut, secretes a certain uh, thing from its temples that attracts other female elephants, which means this elephant is very virile, very strong, potent. But the elephants are not in any rut. The horses are constantly neighing miserably, they're crying, and when you give them grass, they're not relishing it. Donkeys, camels, mules are losing their hair. Even if we are treating them with medical herbs and procedures, they're not getting cured. Crows are flocking together in hundreds and hundreds and flying in all sides in Lanka. And there are crowing on top of house in the terraces. Guess what? Vultures are also showing up and they're circling the sky above Lanka. Jackals are howling inauspiciously, both at dawn and dusk. These are important times, and when jackals are howling, it means inauspiciousness. At the gates of Lanka, massive carnivorous animals are gathered in groups and howling. All these are indications that the right thing to do is to atone for the mistake of bringing Sita away from Ramachandra. And oh, Emperor Ravana, I'm speaking this not because of greed or anything. So it's not, please don't think of me as I have some other motivation. No. Here, all these ministers who have assembled here, they have not given you the right advice. But I'm telling you the right ones. So please listen to they are all afraid. And they also have their motivations, why they don't want to tell you. But I'm telling you for your good. So when Vibhishana spoke like this, all the other ministers are also there. Ravana heard. And these words are hitam, for his benefit. Maha artham has great meaning in it. And mridu, gently spoken. Hetu samhitam, mridu hetu samhitam. And out of benefit and goodness for Ravana. And what Vibhishana spoke was such good words. It's not just it's good for this time. He considered Desha, Kala, Patra very well, what is fit for the past, present, and future. Nishamya tad vakyam, he heard. But Ravana, Jwaraha, he had a lot of this feverishness. Feverishness meaning his anger was very active. The heat of his anger was very strong. Prasaja, he got angry actually. And he replied to Vibhishana. Actually, there's a beautiful way Valmiki describes Ravana is sitting on his throne and Vibhishana comes in. Ravana doesn't speak to his brother. Although Vibhishana has come back, Ravana gestures with his eyes for Vibhishana to sit on a golden throne like that. And then Vibhishana speaks. So right now, Ravana has become angry because he doesn't want to hear good advice. Remember, what was the phrase Prabhupada quotes from Chanakya Pandita? Upadesho hi murkhanam prakopaya nashantaye. So Ravana, who's now angry, tells Vibhishana, Bhayam na pashyami kutaschadapyaham. I don't see any cause of fear. Na raghavaha praptasyati jato maithili. Even Ramachandra cannot attain Sita Devi. Ramachandra can come with whoever he wants. Suraihi, he can come with all the demigods. Sa Indra api, he can bring Indra with him if he wants. Samgare Katham, even if he wants to fight with me, with his army being with the demigods and Indra leading it. Mamagratha Sthasyati Lakshmana Grajaha. He has no chance of standing in front of me. The older brother of Lakshmana has no chance. Ityeva Mukta Surasainya Nashane Mahabalaha Smayati Chanda Vikramaha. Ravana, who can destroy the army of the celestials of the gods, demigods, Mahabalaha Smayati Chanda Vikrama. Smayati means had this his countenance was Chanda Vikrama, was completely incited with anger and valor. Dashanano Bhrataram Aptavadinam. Although his brother Bhrataram Aptavadinam, he spoke lovingly, affectionately for Ravana's benefit. Dashanana, this is 10-headed Ravana. Generally, when someone is a king and you place a helmet on the head, they say the pride rises to the head. And one may say, oh, my head is so big that the crown won't fit it, which means I'm extremely proud and arrogant. So Valmiki is saying Dashanana here is not referring to him as Ravana, but Dashanana, the 10-headed, which means there's so much pride and arrogance that has arisen to his 10 heads. Visarjaya Masa Tada Vibhishanam. He dismissed Vibhishana away from his room or palace. All the good words of Vibhishana felt like water on a duck's back. When a duck is in water, it never gets wet. If we put our hand in water, our hand will get wet. A duck never gets wet because water just slides away. So good advice slid away from Ravana, just as water slides away on a duck's back or a duck's feather. What a waste. Such good advice gone to waste. Now we have to wait to find out what happens next week. Where does this story lead us to? So I'll end with this, that it's it's a sign of great fortune if anyone has in their life at least one person who can be fearless and give us good advice without the fear of our becoming angry at them or saying, oh, you're not my friend, you're giving me advice I don't like. If there's one such person, at least, we are greatly fortunate. Sita reminded Ravana. She said, in your kingdom, it looks like there is nobody to give you good advice and nobody to take good advice. Here, Vibhishana is giving him good advice. What a fortune to have Vibhishana as a brother. And what a misfortune to reject that. So let's see if there's any reflections, comments, thoughts.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for nice class. Am I audible?
Ah, yes, you are.
This is a fascinating exchange between Vibhishana and his brother.
Mm.
And like you mentioned, he's giving good advice, but his brother is not taking it. The thing that was coming to my mind was Narad Muni speaking to Dhruva Maharaj, where Narad Muni was also giving good advice to Dhruva Maharaj, but he says he's not able to follow it for whatever reason. I'm not in that position right now. I'm trying to see, in my case, how I mean, there are instances when I get advice, but I'm not in a position to evaluate whether that's good advice or not, and if I should take it or not. Sometimes I'm just not in that position to act on that advice. So, two things. How do I do that? One, recognize if it is good advice or not, and two, get the strength to act on it.
Well, Dhruva is a 5-year-old boy. Ravana is a 60,000 years at least demon with 10 heads. Not the same. But one thing Dhruva had is honesty. Ravana does not have that honesty. He is not willing to accept that he made a mistake of bringing Sita Devi. He is not willing to accept honestly that his lust is stronger than him. He's not willing to accept it. Even he's being good advice, given good advice. In our case, we may not always see because our vision may not go as far as the person who's giving us the advice. So, first is trust in the person giving advice. Second, if we can't see far enough, then it's all a matter of dialogue. I'm not able to see that far. I'm not able to see the merit in it. Like Arjuna is telling Krishna, I don't see the merit in your advice. I'm confused. So there's dialogue. Here there's no dialogue. What did he say? No fear. And he dismissed Vibhishana. If you notice, there's no dialogue on Ravana's part at all. He's just sitting there listening. And he's even listening. He doesn't like it, but he's only listening because this is my brother. And his brother is one of those useless fellows who just gives advice. I don't like this advice. Anyone else would give advice, their head would be chopped off. But he's not considering the advice. In fact, the whole night he must have thought about it and he just dismissed Vibhishana. So dismissing an idea is not healthy. One may not act on it because one can't see the bigger picture or the longevity of it or the um, the efficacy of it or the benefit in it. Then there's a dialogue. Can you help me? What are your considerations for giving me such advice? It opens. The other person who's giving the advice can verbalize what factors they're considering. Why such advice? What are the consequences? You saw the 6 reasonings here. So something would be there. Is it dharmic? Is it consequential? Is it required? Are there other options? So all of that. So inquiry opens a whole range of color to the advice or suggestion that's being given. Like Arjuna did, he asked, inquired. Okay?
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Pranam. I was very much looking forward to this class more than usual. It's
Oh,
just,
you like Ravana's? Teasing.
just like how Vibhishana, I'm just like reflecting that it's one thing to be like less fearful of, say, an enemy and say good advice or say something like convey your messages to an enemy, or even like in my life maybe to a stranger or with whom I don't have an intimate relationship. But with the situation Vibhishana is in, he's in this whole hall where it's not just like, his brother, he is like his sons, grandsons, his uncles, and basically it's like all these relationships are at stake.
Right.
It's not just like just conveying a message or giving a dharmic advice. It's so I'm just reflecting, it feels that it's much more challenging when it comes to like relationships, because you have this emotional codependency, that to
Right.
actually speak your mind, because there's so much at stake. And so it's just fascinating that how he is just able to think so clearly and be able to speak up. Just thinking about that.
Yeah. So I'll reflect back. It's not that he doesn't care for the relationships. It's quite the contrary. He actually cares for the relationship. And therefore he's feeling the strength plus his own character to speak the truth. But he's speaking it in such a nice way to Ravana. He's not antagonizing him. He actually cares for the relationship. The others who are there care for fighting. They don't care for anything else. They're all so intoxicated by their own strength and valor and that chance to fight that they're not considering what is the strength of the other side. They're resting on their past laurels that, oh yeah, Indrajit, he captured Indra and brought him here. So we are already very powerful. This is what Vali also went through. He hit Sugriva, and then Sugriva immediately called back. Immediately just called back for another fight. And Vali thinks, what? I just spared his life by this much, and he's calling back again. Looks like this time he wants to die. And that's when Tara intervenes and says, there is some other strength behind him. But he didn't take that advice. She embraced Vali and told him that, but he didn't listen. Here Vibhishana is with folded hands pleading because he genuinely cares for his brother. He wants to see his brother alive. He wants to see his brother live well. So he says, no, Rati and what is that? Rati Vardhanam. Oops. Rati Kirti Vardhanam. Bhajasva Dharmam Rati Kirti Vardhanam. Prasida Jive Masaputra Bandhava. Let's live with our sons and families and relatives. Very peaceful. Where you're heading is the ditch. It's not that the relationship is at risk because Ravana is not going to hear that. But he cares for that relationship and the relationship. So he's the only one who has the strength to speak the truth. Very thoughtful. What a personality. What a personality. Fearless.
Thank you, Prabhu, for that. Yes, what a personality.
Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, it is very intriguing to discuss the cruel aspect of Ravana and then the good advice and things like that. But what I feel is that all these different parts are within me. There is the Ravana part and there's a good advice part. All that is there. Everything is so meshed up meshed up, like so intertwined that it's hard to clearly see whether it's the and even more that one can smartly justify the cruel aspect of oneself to just saying, okay, this is also service to Krishna, or somehow justify. Mind is so smart in validating and justifying the other side of us. So how do I even figure out, like, okay, this is the good advice, this is the cruel aspect of myself, and distinguish them so that I can clearly see what is what?
First of all, Atulya, so nice to have you here. It's been such a long time. I haven't heard your voice. So honored that you're here. That's sweet. Thank you. All perplexities are here. Karpanyadoshopahatha svabhava pricchami tvam dharma samudhacheta yat shreyasha nishchitam bruhitam me shishyasteham shadhiman tvam prapanna. A person cannot on one's own unentangle the mesh and the mess, both. If you have a candle or a lamp, it gives light everywhere, but right below itself is darkness. So it always requires someone else who's out of the situation, who's not also complicated in this mesh or mess, who is objective, well-wishing, can think without the being entangled in that complexity, can speak, can say. So Arjuna says, Karpanya dosha. Karpanya dosha. Kripana is one who's completely confused and mixed. And you said, in all of us, there is the Ravana, the Vibhishana, and the sun, and everything is mixed. So he says, my swabhava is dosha apahata swabhava. Dosha upahata. Upahata means being tormented by or being afflicted by. Prabhupada says, swabhava. And my cheta is some mudha. Mudha is not enough. Some mudha, completely. So it requires someone else. It is very, very rare that a person can disentangle themselves on their own. Even if it seems like on their own, it is some instruction from somebody that someone remembers and they get disentangled. Like Gajendra, for 1,000 years he's fighting and there's no solution, but he remembers the prayers from a previous life. That previous life prayers were given by someone to him. So all in all, the grace of Guru is the one that always breaks any tie, is the one that removes all perplexity. So at that point of confusion, where we call it the moment of truth, it is the opening the door for that grace to descend. Otherwise, it's harder, it's more difficult. Right? You agree?
Yes, Prabhu. I mean, as you were speaking, that one must have somebody in their life. It's a great fortune who can give us advice. And I think I'm just reflecting on number of years knowing you. Been such a resource.
Thank you. As over the years, I've also realized I'm myself Karpanya dosha. So both of us are fortunate that we have amazing person and persons in our lives. The parampara is amazing. We're very fortunate. And thank you for your kind words.
Yes, I've been hearing your series on YouTube, Yuddha Kand.
Oh,
No, Sundarakand. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, 9:35. Any burning questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare
Kumari
Krishna. Yes, Mataji.
Prabhu, we know that sometimes if we speak the other person, it will be unpalatable. That if we speak the truth, it is unpalatable to the other person. Then should we always be like Vibhishana, or we should keep quiet? That is the dilemma that.
Sometimes our ability, truth is important. As important is the ability to deliver the truth. And it requires a certain level of, I'm going to say maturity, not indicating at you. I'm just speaking in general. That it requires a certain Shakti, maturity, whatever synonym you want used to deliver. The vessel is also important. Otherwise, people get really upset. And then we may say, Murkha naam hi. They're foolish, they're not taking my advice. for each one of us. If someone doesn't take our advice, the exercise is, oh, maybe the truth was not carried in the proper vessel. So it's to check one's own motivation in this. For example, sometimes someone's motivation can be, oh, I know that's for something they don't know, or I'm better than them, or I can quote 5 more shlokas from them, so I will give them those shlokas as advice. We use Shastra as Shastra, or whatever is the motivation. But see, Vibhishana's motivation. The very fact that he has his hands folded while speaking gives a very good, because these are all dhvanis. Folded hands, he's speaking, means he's already putting himself at a lower position. Although from spiritual maturity perspective, he's far higher. But he's intentionally putting himself at a lower position and speaking from there, so that there is no sense of haughty, self-righteousness in his speech, number one. Second, anything that he spoke, even Valmiki says, Ravana thought that, yeah, these are good words. These are definitely good words. He was not angry at Vibhishana. He was just angry that he has to give Sita up. He's dealing with that. So if someone becomes angry at us, there is a possibility that we didn't carry the message. We didn't carry the truth in a easily digestible way. Of course, they also have their issues that they can't hear the truth. Maybe someone else can speak to them the truth. When Yudhishthir Maharaj is in such distress, he can't hear anything. Krishna didn't speak. He took him to Bhishma Deva. And there Bhishma Deva spoke. So it's one has to consider the situation, the person, whatever it takes for truth to prevail. There are other considerations possibly as well. Sometimes it's just not the good time, not the right time. Yeah, Mataji, a lot of considerations there.
Or maybe that if I'm responsible for that person, then I have to speak, otherwise I need not speak.
It's sometimes responsible, sometimes may not be responsible, but depends. Depends on the urge and depends on if you feel some door can open. If not, they'll say no. They'll say, okay. But yes, if you're responsible for them, then it's you're obliged. You're obliged to say, they are not obliged to take. Okay, let's pause here. If you have other questions, write them down and we'll pick them up next week. Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Ji ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.